She sat quietly in the back row, unnoticed at first. The grand hall was filled with aliens of all kinds, beings of every shape, size, and color. The galaxy's greatest hunters had gathered here, a neutral ground where each had come to show off their skills, to prove they were the best. The event was a mix of competition and camaraderie, a celebration of strength and survival. But amid the excitement, one figure remained almost invisible. Her name was Lyra, and she was human. While the others chatted loudly and proudly boasted of their achievements, she simply observed. There was no need to speak. Her presence alone was enough. Though she appeared ordinary, dressed in simple clothing and sitting with her back straight, every hunter in the room could sense something about her. They didn't know what it was. Perhaps it was the way she moved, or the calmness in her gaze, but there was something that made them uneasy. Some of the more experienced hunters glanced her way, their sharp eyes trained to spot threats. Yet they couldn't figure out why they felt uncomfortable. She was silent, still, but there was a presence in her stillness that made their instincts twitch. T-Rex, a massive creature with skin like stone and eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire, was one of the first to notice. He was a renowned hunter, feared across the galaxy for his unparalleled tracking skills. If there was a challenge to find someone, T-Rex was always the first to accept. No one had ever escaped his notice, no matter how hidden they thought they were. Yet, as he stood in the center of the hall, speaking to a few of his fellow hunters, his attention kept drifting to Lyra. He tried to ignore it at first, thinking it was simply because she was new. But then his instincts, finely honed through years of hunting, told him there was more to her than met the eye. Her silence felt like a challenge. He couldn't help himself. He walked over to her, his heavy footsteps echoing through the hall. Lyra didn't look up, didn't flinch, but he could feel her awareness. As though she had known he would come, standing before her, T-Rex spoke, his voice low and steady. "You're not like the others. What are you doing here?" Lyra's eyes flicked up, meeting his gaze for the first time. There was no fear in her eyes, no hesitation, only calm. For a moment, T-Rex felt as if he were the one being observed. Her gaze seemed to pierce right through him, and he felt a strange discomfort settle in his chest, but he pushed it aside. "I'm here to watch," she replied, her voice soft, yet firm. "Just watching." Her words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, T-Rex was silent. He studied her face, trying to read any hint of a lie, but there was nothing. She was a mystery, one he had never encountered before. He leaned in closer, his towering form casting a shadow over her. "You're not a hunter. What do you think you can learn here?" He spoke the words like a challenge. Lyra didn't respond immediately. Instead, she returned to her tablet, her fingers swiping across the screen. For a second, it almost seemed like she hadn't heard him at all. But then, her voice came again, softer this time, as though she had already decided what she would say. "I know what it's like to be hunted." The words struck T-Rex harder than he expected. He stared at her, unsure if he had heard correctly. What did she mean by that? He wasn't the only one who felt the shift in the room. Other hunters, who had been minding their own business, now glanced over, their attention drawn by the tension between the two. The feeling of unease spread, a ripple that affected everyone in the hall. T-Rex straightened up, his mind racing. He had heard rumors about humans, how they were weaker than most species, how they were easily outmatched in any physical confrontation. But there was something in Lyra's tone, something in the way she spoke, that made him question everything he thought he knew. The truth was, Lyra wasn't just sitting there as a quiet observer. She was drawing attention. She was a silent force in the room, one that commanded more respect than any loud boast or display of strength ever could. He shook his head, deciding to test her. "I'll track you," he said, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "I'll find out what you're hiding." "I always do." Lyra's gaze flickered up once more, and this time, there was a small, knowing smile on her face. "I'm not hiding anything," she said. "But you can try." T-Rex frowned, sensing the challenge in her words. He didn't like being challenged. He didn't like it at all. But there was something about her, something deep inside, that made him feel as though this hunt would be unlike any he had ever experienced. The other hunters, sensing the change in the atmosphere, began to murmur among themselves. They had all heard the challenge, and they watched closely, eager to see if T-Rex could succeed where others might fail. The atmosphere in the room shifted from light-hearted competition to something far more serious. The hunt had begun, but no one knew who the real prey was. That evening, the event took a darker turn. As the predators made their way through the station, tracking, testing, and challenging one another, Lyra remained in her seat, as if nothing had changed. But in truth, she was the eye of the storm, and her presence was enough to unsettle even the most experienced of hunters. T-Rex, now determined, began to move toward the tracking zone. His mind was set on finding Lyra. He would prove that she was no different from any of the other beings in the room. She was just another human, and humans were easily hunted. Yet, as he moved through the maze of corridors, he felt it again. The strange sensation of being watched. It was like a pull, an awareness that followed him. Even though there was no one around, he glanced over his shoulder, his sharp eyes scanning the shadows, but there was nothing there. Still, the feeling lingered, gnawing at him. Something was wrong. The other hunters were starting to notice the same thing. One by one, they began to feel the change. The once confident leaders of the hunt now moved cautiously, unsure of their surroundings. It was as if the very station itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen, and that something was about to happen. The hunt had begun, but Lyra was not the prey. T-Rex had no idea yet, but he would soon find out. Sometimes, the hunter is not the one who does the chasing. The hall was still buzzing with excitement when T-Rex finally moved into the shadows of the station, a place designed to test even the most skilled hunters. The towering structure was a labyrinth of metal walls, corridors, and arenas, each more complicated than the last. It was the perfect place for a predator like T-Rex to showcase his skills. But this time, his mind wasn't on the other hunters. It was focused entirely on Lyra. She had challenged him with nothing but her words, but somehow, that felt like a bigger test than any he had faced before. He was known as the best hunter in the galaxy. No one ever escaped his gaze. No one could outrun his senses. But Lyra made him feel as though he were the one being hunted. That was a feeling he had never experienced before. The station's artificial lights flickered above him as he stalked through the darkened hallways. He had been given a head start, as was customary for these kinds of challenges. The hunters often scattered, each given a target to track and capture. But T-Rex knew something was different this time. Lyra wasn't just a target. She wasn't like the others. There was something about her, a presence that unsettled him. He stopped, turning his head, listening intently. The usual sounds of the station, the hum of machinery, the footfalls of the other hunters, were all gone. It was as if the world had gone silent, holding its breath. And then he heard it, a soft sound, like the whisper of fabric moving through the air. He spun around, his body tensed, ready for action. But there was nothing. Just the empty corridor stretching before him. T-Rex narrowed his eyes. It was impossible. No one could move that quietly. Not even he could move without making a sound in a place like this. He was a hunter, and the best at what he did, so why couldn't he sense her? He continued his search. His large, powerful footsteps echoing against the cold metal floor. His sharp, yellow eyes scanned every corner, every shadow, every crevice of the station. He had to find her. He would find her. There was no way he was going to be outdone by a human. But the more he searched, the more he felt something was off. Every time he turned a corner, every time he pressed forward, he felt a growing sense of unease. It wasn't fear, no. T-Rex didn't know fear. It was something deeper, more primal. It was the sensation of being watched, and not just by one pair of eyes, but by an entire galaxy of unseen watchers. He paused again, his ears twitching. Something was different now. He wasn't just searching for Lyra, he was being hunted. The thought made his skin prickle, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. He scanned the corridor again. It was empty. Still. And then he heard another soft whisper of movement. This time, it was different. This time, it was closer. A shadow darted across the far end of the hallway, quick and fluid, almost like it wasn't human at all. T-Rex moved faster, his claws scraping against the floor as he raced toward the corner. He rounded it in one smooth motion, his massive body practically flying with the power of his steps. But there was no one there. He was alone. Just like before, but something had changed. There was no mistaking it, now he wasn't alone. And Lyra was at the center of it. T-Rex's pulse quickened. He could feel it now, the slow, growing pressure building inside him. He wasn't the hunter. He wasn't the one in control. For the first time in his life, he felt completely out of his depth, and that terrified him. Meanwhile, in the far corner of the station, Lyra remained still, as silent as ever. She had been aware of T-Rex's movements the moment he began to search for her. She had felt his gaze, the sharpness of his focus, the way he moved through the station with the confidence of a predator who had never failed. But she didn't move. She didn't react. She simply watched. Her eyes were calm. And yet there was an intensity to her gaze that could cut through the thickest armor. She wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't afraid of any of them. She had been hunted before. Many times. She had survived it. She knew how to wait, how to let the tension grow until it reached its breaking point. The predators thought they were the hunters. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know what she was. Lyra remained in the shadows, her figure barely visible. She could hear every step T-Rex made, every turn he took. She could sense the growing frustration in his movements. He was getting closer, but she could feel that he still didn't understand. He didn't know what she was capable of. She had been following the hunters since the beginning, moving silently through the station. She was playing their game, but she was doing it on her terms. She wasn't the one running. She wasn't the one hiding. She was simply letting them come to her. And one by one, the predators were starting to make mistakes. They were all on edge now, their instincts screaming at them that something was wrong. But none of them could put their finger on it. They were used to hunting, used to being in control. But Lyra was something they couldn't predict, something they couldn't understand. T-Rex was the first to reach her. He turned a corner and found her sitting there, as calm and still as ever. His breath caught in his throat. How had she moved so quickly? How had she gotten here without him sensing her? There was no logical explanation, but there was something else in the air now, a tension that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just about the hunt anymore. It was about survival. T-Rex stared at her for a long moment, his mind racing. He was no longer sure who the prey was. Was it him? Was it the others? Lyra's voice broke the silence, soft and steady. You think you're the hunter. But you're not. Not anymore. Her words sent a shiver down T-Rex's spine. His claws flexed involuntarily. He had never been spoken to like this. Never been made to feel so small. He was used to being the predator, to having others cower before him. But not here, not now. What do you want from me? He growled, his voice low and threatening. Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. I don't want anything. I'm just observing. But you're the one who's being watched. The words hung in the air between them, and for the first time, T-Rex felt the weight of them. It wasn't just the other hunters who were tracking him. It wasn't just Lyra. The entire station, the very place they stood, was watching them. He could feel the eyes of something older, something more powerful, lurking beneath the surface of the station. It was alive, and it had been waiting for this moment. Waiting for Lyra. Who are you? T-Rex demanded, his voice shaking slightly. Lyra stood up slowly, her eyes never leaving his. I'm someone who's been hunted. But I've learned to turn the tables. The predators were in danger, and they didn't even know it. The tension in the station grew thicker with each passing minute. Terex could still feel the sting of Lyra's words lingering in his mind. He wasn't the hunter anymore. The thought gnawed at him, making his blood run cold. He had always been the one in control, the one who decided the outcome of the chase. But now, for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure of anything. He stood frozen in the narrow corridor, his body tense, his claws flexing as if ready to strike. His instincts were still telling him to hunt, to pursue, to capture. But something was stopping him. It wasn't fear. He didn't know what fear was, but there was something inside him, deep in his gut, that made him hesitate. It was the feeling of being trapped. It was the feeling of being outmatched. Lyra hadn't moved since she spoke to him. She remained in the shadows, her posture calm and composed, as though nothing had happened. It was maddening. How could someone like her remain so still, so unaffected, while the rest of the galaxy's deadliest hunters were scrambling around, trying to figure out what was going on? For a moment, Terex considered leaving. He had hunted countless beings across the galaxy, and none had ever made him feel like this. But something kept pulling him back. Something kept drawing him toward her. He gritted his teeth, his large hands curling into fists. "You think you've won, don't you?" he said, his voice thick with frustration. Lyra finally spoke, her voice soft but clear. "I didn't come here to win. I came here to show you something." The words hung in the air, and for the first time, Terex wasn't sure if he wanted to hear what came next. He knew that he couldn't let this go, not when it felt like his very existence was being questioned. "You don't know what you're dealing with," he growled, taking a step closer. "I've tracked thousands of beings. I've survived countless hunts. You're just a human, nothing more." Lyra's eyes met his. There was no fear in them, only calm understanding. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with." Terex was about to respond when something strange happened. The floor beneath his feet seemed to vibrate. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but it grew stronger with every second. A low hum filled the air, and Terex could feel the ground shift slightly. The station itself was reacting to something, but to what? He turned his head, his senses alert, trying to pinpoint the source of the disturbance. And that's when he saw it. Far down the corridor, at the end of the hall, a faint light flickered. It was a strange, almost otherworldly glow, pulsing in time with the vibrations beneath them. Without thinking, Terex's instincts took over. He moved quickly, his large frame cutting through the darkness, his muscles rippling with speed. But as he reached the source of the light, something stopped him. A voice echoed in his mind, a voice not his own. "Turn back." The words were clear and sharp, but they weren't spoken out loud. They were more like a feeling, a sensation that flooded his mind. A warning. He stopped dead in his tracks. His heart began to pound in his chest, his breathing quickening. He didn't know who was speaking, or where the voice had come from, but it was there, and it was telling him to leave. But Terex wasn't the kind of hunter to back down from a challenge. He had never been one to run from danger. He took a deep breath and ignored the voice, stepping closer to the light. It was then that he realized the truth. The station wasn't just a building. It wasn't just a neutral ground for hunters to prove their strength. It was alive. The light before him grew brighter, its energy rippling through the air. It was no longer just a simple glow. It was a pulse, a heartbeat, like something ancient awakening from a long slumber. The very walls around him seemed to hum, as though they were alive, responding to whatever force was at the center of this strange phenomenon. And then, it clicked. Lyra had known about this all along. She hadn't just been observing. She had been waiting. Waiting for this moment, for the awakening of something much older, much more powerful than anything the hunters could comprehend. Terex's heart skipped a beat. He turned back toward Lyra, his eyes wide with realization. She hadn't been hiding. She hadn't been running. She had been guiding him, drawing him toward the truth. She was the key to all of this. And now, She was the only one who could control it. The energy in the station surged, almost as if responding to his thoughts. The walls shuddered, and the sound of metal creaking filled the air. T-Rex took a step back, his instincts finally catching up with his mind. He could feel the presence of something far greater than anything he had ever encountered. And it was not just in the station, it was in Lyra. You knew this would happen, didn't you? Trex said, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and awe. Lyra nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. I've known for a long time. T-Rex's mind raced. How could she know? How could a human know about the ancient forces that governed the station? But Lyra wasn't just any human. She wasn't like the others. He had been wrong to think she was just a target. She was something else entirely. Something that even he, with all his experience and skill, couldn't begin to understand. As the vibrations beneath their feet intensified, T-Rex felt something shift in the air. The very fabric of the station seemed to be warping, changing. And then, it happened. A massive door, hidden deep within the station's core, slowly began to open. The sound of ancient gears grinding against one another echoed through the halls, and from the darkness beyond the door, something stepped forward. It was not human, not alien. It was something older, something primal. Its form was shifting, as though it couldn't decide what shape it wanted to take. But one thing was clear. It was powerful. And it had come to answer Lyra's call. T-Rex stumbled backward, his breath catching in his throat. He had never felt anything like this before. The presence before him was overwhelming, its energy radiating through the air. And then, the voice spoke again. Louder this time, filling his mind with its command. You are not the hunters. You are the hunted. The words echoed in his mind as the energy in the station surged, reaching a crescendo. T-Rex could feel the very walls closing in around him. He was no longer in control. He was at the mercy of the ancient force that Lyra had awakened, and as he looked back at her, he realized the truth. She wasn't just observing, she was in command. And the galaxy's greatest hunters were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. The room was filled with silence, the kind of silence that seemed to stretch across the very air, pressing in from all sides. T-Rex stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had spent his entire life hunting, tracking, and capturing the deadliest creatures in the galaxy. But now, in this very moment, he realized he was no longer the hunter. He was just another prey, caught in a trap of forces far beyond his understanding. The creature that had stepped out of the shadows was not like anything he had ever seen before. Its shape was fluid, constantly shifting. Like smoke or shadow, it seemed to ripple and change as though it were not entirely physical. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed with an eerie light, bright and unblinking. There was no telling where its body began and where it ended, but there was one thing T-Rex knew for certain. This being was powerful, far more powerful than any hunter. The air in the corridor grew thicker as the creature's presence filled the room. It was as if the very atmosphere had changed, and T-Rex could feel the weight of ancient energy pressing down on him. The walls of the station seemed to close in, almost as if the building itself was alive, responding to the arrival of this mysterious entity. And Lyra. She had been the one to awaken it. She had known this would happen. She had known what lay dormant beneath the station, and she had called it forth. The thought sent a chill down T-Rex's spine. How had she known? How was it possible for a human to have such knowledge? Lyra stepped forward, her calm demeanor never faltering. She stood between T-Rex and the creature, her figure small compared to its massive presence. But T-Rex could feel the power that radiated from her. She wasn't just standing there, she was connected to the creature, to the station, to something older than the galaxy itself. The creature turned its head, if it could be called a head, and looked directly at Lyra. Its gaze was not one of aggression but of recognition, as though it had been waiting for her to awaken it from its long slumber. It has been a long time, the creature's voice rumbled. Not through sound but in T-Rex's mind. It was not a voice, but a presence, filling every corner of his thoughts. It was ancient, vast, and almost indescribable. Lyra nodded slowly. I knew it would be you. Terex felt a strange sensation in his chest, a mixture of awe and fear. This creature was beyond anything he had ever encountered. It wasn't just a being of power, it was a force. And Lyra had control over it. Why? Terex finally managed to ask, his voice shaking. Why did you awaken it? What is it? Lyra turned to face him, her expression still calm, still unreadable. This is the forgotten guardian of the station, she said quietly. It has been here for eons, watching over this place. It is not just a hunter. It is the protector of a lost civilization. A race that once ruled the stars. Terex stared at her, trying to understand. A civilization? He repeated. What do you mean? How are you connected to it? Lyra's gaze softened, and for the first time, Terex saw something more than just quiet confidence in her eyes. There was a deep sadness there, an understanding of something that had been hidden from the rest of the galaxy for millennia. I am their last heir, she said. The last of a line that was forgotten by time. My ancestors were the ones who built this station. They were the ones who created the technology that harnessed the power of the stars themselves. But they were also hunted, their empire fell, and their legacy was erased. I am the last one who remembers. Terex took a step back, his mind struggling to process her words. You're not just a human, he whispered. You're something else. Lyra nodded. I am human, but I carry the blood of a people who were far more than that. The power of my ancestors is in my blood, and I have waited all my life to awaken it. Terex's mind was reeling. He had hunted countless beings across the galaxy, tracked them through every corner of the universe. But none of them had ever made him feel so small, so insignificant. Lyra wasn't just a target. She was a force in herself. And now, the entire galaxy would have to reckon with that fact. As the creature loomed behind Lyra, Terex felt a shift in the air. The very station seemed to vibrate with a low hum, and the walls glowed faintly, as though they were coming alive with ancient energy. The creature stepped forward, its shifting form almost blending with the walls around it. It was not just standing there anymore, it was moving, guiding the energy of the station itself. The power it carried was vast, beyond anything Terex could understand. Why do you stay, Terex? Lyra asked, her voice steady, as if she were speaking to an old friend. Why do you continue to hunt? What is it that drives you? Terex was taken aback by the question. He had never thought about it like that. Hunting had always been a part of him. It was what he did, what he was born to do. He had always believed that to be the strongest was to be the one who controlled the hunt. But now, standing before this ancient creature and the woman who had awakened it, he realized how wrong he had been. I hunt because I was taught to, he said slowly. Because that's what I am. A predator. It's all I've ever known. Lyra's eyes softened, but her voice remained firm. And yet, you are not the only one who has the strength to survive. There are others who fight, who survive by different means. Your strength is not the only kind that matters. It's time to learn that. Terex didn't know how to respond. He had never been spoken to like this, never been told that his strength alone wasn't enough. But standing here, in the presence of something so much greater than himself, he couldn't deny the truth in her words. The creature moved closer, its form almost blending with the shadows now. The galaxy has forgotten. It rumbled, its voice a deep echo in Terex's mind. It has forgotten the true power that once ruled the stars. But now, the time has come to remember. Lyra stepped forward, standing tall and unshaken. It is time for a new order, she said quietly. A new balance. The old ways are gone, and the galaxy will have to adapt. Terex watched as Lyra turned to face the creature, her eyes filled with purpose. She wasn't just a hunter. She wasn't just a survivor. She was the key to something much larger, something that would reshape everything. And for the first time in his life, Terex realized he was not the one who would decide the outcome. He was not the one who would hunt. He was the one who had been hunted all along. The creature, its form now merging with the walls and the very fabric of the station, let out a low, resonant sound, almost like a sigh of release. "The cycle has ended," it said. "The past is now reborn." As the creature disappeared into the depths of the station, Lyra turned back to Terex. "It's time for you to leave," she said. "This place is no longer a hunting ground. It is a sanctuary, and you are no longer welcome here." Terex stood still, his mind racing, but he knew she was right. He had no place in this new world. And with that realization, he slowly turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the station. He wasn't the hunter anymore. He was just another being, forced to adapt to the new reality that Lyra had awakened. The station's hum faded into the background, and the ancient energies settled once more. A new order had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.